Evening, everyone, and welcome to the Holistic Cannabis Academy's webinar series. I'm Donna Shields, and I am co-founder of the Holistic Cannabis Academy. And as many of you probably know, if you know us and you've been following us, you know that we are the only online cannabis education training program that's really designed for the health professional looking at cannabis through a holistic lens. And so I can only assume that if you have tuned in to listen to the webinar, chances are you are a health professional of some sort who's maybe thinking about getting into the cannabis space. Maybe you're already in it and you're looking for ways to kind of build out your career. And that's exactly what we hope to help you with today. As you know, dispensaries are indeed becoming more and more of an employment opportunity and a place for us as cannabis coaches to sell our services. And so I thought it would be really interesting for us to talk with somebody who has done exactly that. So I have with me today Susan Boskey, who is one of our students at the Academy, and Susan is based in Washington State. And she has done a pretty cool job, I think, of getting her foot in the door at a dispensary. And I thought it would be really helpful to talk to her and find out a little bit about how she went about accomplishing this. Because I think for some of us, it might seem like an opportunity that we know is out there, but we may be a little bit intimidated. We're not quite sure how to approach them and really how to sell our services. So Susan's going to give us going to tell us her story, really. So Susan, thank you so much for joining us today. And I am going to let you introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about what you were doing before you decided to be a cannabis coach and what led you down this path to where you are today.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for having me. Well, where to begin? I used to have a practice as a colonic therapist, helping people detoxify. And I did that for many years. And perhaps I should say before that, I have been into, quote unquote, alternative health since I was 20. So it's been probably 50 years now almost.
Mm-hmm.
So my journey has been personal and then professional. And then when I found out about the cannabis, the program, Holistic Cannabis Academy, it just seemed right to me to be able to help people again. I really wanted to get back to the health field because it's so important to me personally, and because of my experience with detoxification. I thought this was a perfect segue into the cannabis space. So that's why I took the program, and it was very rigorous, and I studied and I enjoyed the study very much. So.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point, Susan, that is probably applicable for most people listening. We all have come into this industry from another life, from another career for the most part. And we may be, as you were, a colonic therapist. I'm a registered dietitian. I know we have people that are health coaches, nutrition coaches, Reiki practitioners, herbalists, people who are already in some kind of a healing modality, as you were, and making that leap of taking what you know and what you're already good at and combining it with cannabis care. I think that's really the end goal here. And it sounds like you figured out a way to do that. Can you tell us a little bit about the dispensary that you approached? And I mean, just kind of give us an idea of what made you even think that you could sell your services to a dispensary, and then what was step one?
Well, sure. Actually, step one was bringing my card and showing up in a dispensary. Before I even thought I was going to be associated with them, I was just going around there's 25 dispensaries in this county, Whatcom County, Bellingham is the city. And so I was going in and making a personal contact and asking them if it was all right if I left my cards there, telling them what I did. And then I realized that because I have a friend who also works in a dispensary, that one of them in town was particularly focused on medical. And so the light bulb went on for me, and I thought, what if I got a job there? I would learn about all the products, because the products are state by state. You can learn your state, but you don't know another states. So I would learn the products. I would meet people. It would be a great feeder for me with my business to when it was appropriate, to hand out my card. And so I did get hired. It was a blessing. And I spoke to the owner and I said, look, I don't want to be sneaky about this, but how would you feel about me handing out my business card for my practice? Because I had told him about my practice. And this was one of the oldest dispensaries in the area. Actually, it was the first. And he said, oh, no, please hand them out. In fact, he said, the other part of the building, you could have your office there. And that pretty much floored me.
How great is that, right?
Yeah, because what he was saying was, there's all these very strict rules in terms of the 502 dispensary laws about how what you can do in that physical space. But the other part of the building was a different business structure. So
Right.
it would allow me to have a private business there. And he really wanted his company to get known as the medical go-to in town. So he loved the idea. It was really amazing, because I thought, oh my gosh, maybe this is a conflict of interest for him. But no, for him, it was just contributing to what he wanted his business to be known for.
So he really viewed this as you being an asset, as a way to help differentiate his dispensary by
Yes.
having your kind of a service available right there.
Yeah, that was totally true. And we were actually thinking of all the things we could do for the community. For example, there was another space in the retail area where we were talking about having like a monthly educational program. I've developed a PowerPoint presentation, which I shared with him. And I thought, just be a standard newbie kind of event that we could have in our weekly, newspaper. Almost every community has one of those free weeklies.
Sure.
Where you have events. And so it could be just a repetitive program that we would have, just as a way of introducing people to the medicinal side of cannabis.
Susan, when you and I were first talking about this, it struck me that something that you said, and I think it's really relevant perhaps to share with the viewers who are listening, because you had said something about how one of your goals was really to get in there and be part of the team and learn the products, and not come in like you were some fancy pants health professional, but really to get buy-in from the other sales team there, so that you would really be portrayed and felt like you would be part of that team. Did that strategy? It sounds like that strategy probably worked out pretty good for you.
Well, it did, because the truth is that I knew that the people who were on the retail floor, I knew that they knew more than I did actually about the products. It wasn't even a benevolence on my part. I was really clear that I had a lot to learn in terms of the specific products that were being offered, the brands, the ratios, the
Right.
popularity, all of that. I was just a newbie. So yeah, and I wanted to just be part of the team, and then evolve my participation with the company from there. Yeah.
Right. So, I think this might be a good place to explain to those who are watching who maybe don't have as much knowledge about what's going on in the dispensary industry right now. And of course, this totally depends on what state you're located in. Of course, Susan is in Washington. They have a very well developed medical and adult use program. I mean, you heard her say, my gosh, she had 25 dispensaries right in her immediate area. So that's great when you've got a lot of opportunity to work with. But here's what's happening in the dispensary world right now. There is a tremendous amount of consolidation. So what I mean by that is a lot of the dispensaries that previously had been individually owned, they have been around, mom and pop type operations, individual owners, those are getting bought now by larger chains, multi-state operators that are what we call vertically integrated. And what I mean by that is these are large companies now that are controlling all facets of the cannabis space where they're doing business. So they are growers, they are extractors, they're producing products, and they are also owners of these retail dispensaries. So a very vertically integrated business now starts acting more professional. And I can tell you, even with our experience here at the Academy, we now, and I'm delighted this is happening finally, we have had dispensary chains contact us and say, hey, we know we need some training for our sales staff. That wasn't those were not conversations that were happening a year or so ago. But to Susan's point, she was really embraced when she walked in the door. And this obviously was an owner who was very forward thinking. And of course, you also have to choose dispensaries that have more of a medical focus. So
Right.
walking in, right, Susan? I mean,
Yes.
this is
There's a
not a
lot of
service that's for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So, and that's part of the homework that you would do before you even decide which dispensaries to go into, is get a handle on who's looking to build their business and their reputation on being a good medical cannabis provider. So it sounds like you really hit the jackpot.
Well, yeah, he was a fantastic owner, and they actually, it was the first dispensary in the county when it was medical only. As you know, in 2014 is when recreational came into play. Before that, they were called medical collectives, and
Right.
at least in this state, growers were able to grow for individuals, and it was a whole different ballgame. So he had a list of customers for all the way back to 2010 that had been medical that were still coming in.
Wow.
And so that was the foundation of his business.
Right, right. You know what? I forgot to mention when we started, and shame on me, we are going to take your questions towards the end. So as we're talking, as thoughts come up to you, by all means, we have that chat bar there, but down below you will see an area, it says open discussion. So please type in your questions and we will get to them towards the end of the webinar. Susan and I are going to chat here for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. And if for whatever reason we don't get to your questions, you can certainly email me and I will answer you. I will answer you in the next couple of days. And my email is donna@holisticCannabisAcademy.com. So we're here to help you, to give you some tips, some ideas. If you've been thinking about doing this yourself and it seems a little scary, we're here to tell you that this can be done. And as Susan has just mentioned, she ran into a very enthusiastic owner. Now, you may not always you may not get a home run the first time out. It may mean knocking on a lot of doors. Susan, did you have that experience of having to talk to a lot of different people, or were you pretty lucky that you hit this place first or early on, and this just really clicked?
Well, that's a good question, Donna. Actually, it was my second attempt. The first one I went to is the top sales in the retail cannabis space here in the county. And to be honest, I wasn't all that impressed because it was so intensively recreational. I could just tell by being in there and filling out the application. I didn't get a call back or anything.
Right.
And so then I think I mentioned I spoke with a girlfriend of mine who was her job at a dispensary is simply checking IDs.
Mm-hmm.
And so she knew the ones that were more heavily medical. And she said, go here, try them. And so I did. And actually they were in hiring mode. So that was very fortunate the way it worked out.
Right. So, and
Yeah.
I think that's, it sounds so simple, but honestly, make friends with the bud tenders, right? Get to
That's
know
right.
this,
Yeah.
get to know the sales staff, because they're the ones who are going to be able to give you kind of the inside track. And many of these sales staff, they bounce around. They have worked at multiple different dispensaries in a given area, so they know who the owners are and what businesses do have more of this medical orientation. So they're really a good source to help steer you in the right direction.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the place that I landed was it was one of the staff that told me they were hiring. And what's so interesting is that the owner told me he doesn't call people bud tenders, he calls them cannabis consultants. And I loved that.
Right.
Because he thought it was sort of too, not, it was like bartender.
Yes, and you're absolutely right that the industry is trying to move away, and particularly those who are attempting to be known for their medical care, they are moving away from that term bud tender. I know we are one of the large groups in Florida. They call them patient care representatives. So
Nice.
that too is that sends a message, right, to the consumer that
Hmm.
this is a place where you can come in and get some trusted advice. Somebody said to me, and I thought this was hysterical, and we all can understand this image. I was at a cannabis meeting, and somebody said, really, does your 80-year-old grandma want to go into a dispensary and get their health advice from somebody wearing a Scooby-Doo t-shirt and dreadlocks? I mean, and if you could just put that picture in your mind, that is very off-putting for a large part of the population, particularly for people who are ill. They are looking for trusted advice. So, coming, for a dispensary to have somebody who is a knowledgeable source, that's golden to them. And along the same lines, obviously, and I think this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, when you are going into a dispensary for a role as a cannabis coach and you're a health professional, that's exactly what you should look like, right?
Right.
Dress like a
Exactly.
professional.
Yeah.
No Scooby-Doo t-shirts.
But there are plenty of them, even where I was working. I working. The at one point, the owner said to me, some of my older customers have said to me, "Why don't you have anybody here that looks like us?" And he said, "Well, I just haven't had the opportunity to meet any of them who wanted to work here." So. And when as I was working behind the counter there, I can tell you there were people in their 80s that came in. And
Yes.
I
And,
would
and
say, yeah, go ahead.
Susan, you bring up, I think, a really good point, because obviously the people that are listening to this webinar, I know probably span quite an age group. And I know that just from the kind of students that come into the program, we have people that are just starting their careers. We have people that are career changers in the middle. And then there's folks that are our age, right?
Mhm.
And so I honestly do think that there is a very definite role for coaches of all ages to appeal to the different segments of the customer base that is walking in the door. So if you are somebody who is in the mid or later part of your career, don't be put off by thinking, oh, well, this is just a young person's game, because it isn't. Seniors are truly the fastest growing segment of the cannabis consumer market, and women are the fastest gender growing in terms of their use of products. And so if you're a woman and if you're older, I think you got it made. So just to say that this really is a career that is suited for people, male and female, of course, of all ages. So Susan, one of the questions that I get a lot from people is, okay, I have a dispensary who wants to use my services, and they're going to either refer people out to me, or in your instance, where you may have an office space adjacent to the dispensary, how much do I charge, right? This is a question that plagues everyone. What's my fee schedule? I don't want to overprice. I don't want to underprice. And of course, this varies depending on where you are, the market you're in. And you don't have to give us specifics if you don't want to, but can you give us some idea of how you thought about the pricing structure for your services, knowing that you are adjacent to a dispensary?
Right. Well, I know that, that's a really good question, and I have thought a lot about it. Um, so, in my thought process, I realized that, as we all know, even in the cannabis space, the cannabis is just one thing. It's not the whole potato. The person has a whole life. They have emotions. They have a mental life. They have a physical life. They have relationships. So I was looking at it holistically, and I had to think about what I was going to offer, actually. And so what I landed on was a personalized care plan that started with an intake form that I've developed, and then a discussion about the intake form to make sure, and my questions once I read it, to make sure that I didn't miss anything. And what I have found is that I do a lot of research for people.
Mm-hmm.
Once they tell me about their situation and what they want to accomplish with cannabis, but I'm telling them it may not be just cannabis, it may be your lifestyle as
Right.
well, that we're looking at. And so I do a lot of research for them. And quite honestly, that takes me a lot of time. I would say up to 10 hours of research for a person. And then, including putting together a form, like my last one was a 4-page personalized care plan
Right.
for my client. And
There there's a question, Susan, that is somewhat related to what you're talking about right now. Um, how long are your visits typically with someone?
well, the first visit is longer, the intake one, and it depends on whether I'm meeting them in person. If I'm meeting them in person, I would say that it's probably about an hour and a half.
Okay.
Um, and then the way I have shaped it, and I think again, everybody's got to decide, I believe, what they want to offer, and then look at their pricing according to that. Um, and then after that, it would be the follow-up appointment once they have their care plan, which would probably be um, uh, up to an hour, I would say. And
Mm-hmm.
then I decided to offer two 30-minute follow-up sessions afterwards, because I want to follow up with people. And then, so for me, I didn't want to charge on an hourly basis.
Right.
for obvious reasons. So I just have it as a package.
Okay,
And,
so someone, they come in and what they're buying is the initial consult and then a couple of follow-up appointments, and it's all bundled as one price?
yes, that's what
Okay.
I've done.
And that's,
And like I said, that's me. Somebody else is going to do it differently. But I wanted to make sure, I'm thinking about the client, and I want to make sure that they get their needs met. And sometimes just doing it by the hour, in terms of all the time, they don't see the time that I put in
yes,
when after I'm meeting with them initially, and what I'm doing to develop their plan. So really, the time with them is kind of the briefest time almost. I mean, as far as the time I'm putting into it. So anyway, that's how I'm doing it.
right.
And
That's
go ahead.
a great point, Susan, because the customer only, in their mind, it's the face-to-face time that they have with you, and they don't really have an appreciation or an understanding of all the background work that happens before and after they show up.
That's right. It's really true.
Right. And particularly, in some practices, if you are in a practice also where you may be selling supplements, or you may be selling, and this is not specifically if you're working adjacent to a dispensary, but say you're in a practice that is separate and apart from a dispensary, but the dispensary is referring clients to you at your location. So that may represent an opportunity. If you are in a practice where you're selling supplement products, perhaps CBD products, these are obviously all revenue streams that you can develop, but that again, all of that takes time. And I agree with you. I think the idea of a package price, or maybe having two options. Do you offer just one price, one package, as opposed to a couple of different offerings?
I understand, and I thought about that. Right now, getting started, I have just started with one price, but I am well aware of having a graduated schedule for people. I just haven't really known how to do right by somebody with just like an hourly session. If they say, well, yeah, let's meet for an hour. So that, I probably, I need some counseling on that,
Right.
Myself. Yeah.
I'm looking at some of the questions that are coming in right now, and I think this is a perfect time to kind of move into some questions, because people are asking about this nuts and bolts kind of thing that you're discussing right now. So so somebody here says that they are currently an assistant manager at a medical marijuana dispensary, and they're looking to develop themselves into a manager position. And they also have a nutrition coaching business, and they're trying to figure out how to integrate all of this together. So this is somebody who already is working in the cannabis in a dispensary, and yet they also have this nutrition coaching hat. And I'm going to certainly ask Susan what she thinks, but my initial thought is, does the owner even know that you have this dual capabilities? I mean, what a gem of an employee, right? Somebody who is in a managerial position already, knows the products, knows knows the inventory system, knows the nuts and bolts of how this dispensary operates, and maybe the management or the owner doesn't even realize this person has this other nutrition coaching capability. So, gosh, to me, this seems like getting a sit-down appointment, and if you obviously have a resume that would be perfect. If you have a website that you've already developed for your coaching business, you'd want to make them aware of that. I mean, I think sometimes some of us are afraid to toot our own horn and we sell ourselves short. So we think everybody knows what we do, but really they don't. So I don't know, Susan, do you have any thoughts of how this person who already has a foot in the door should go about this?
Well, here I had two thoughts. One is, I don't know about other states. However, in Washington, to be able to talk medically to customers, one needs to go through the state medical cannabis program,
Right.
which I have not gone through, and I know from the owner telling me it was not very rigorous at all. But my point is, that's maybe that's a question I have for this person. And then number two is that it seems to me that it's like there's apples and oranges, like being on the floor, and even with all her knowledge, and even if she has a state certification for medical, it seems that to me that having a practice is just another level of her skill base that would be a separate business. It wouldn't be operated from the dispensary, but it could be an asset, like I was saying for myself. It could be an asset to that dispensary to
Right.
either be nearby or not nearby, but to have referrals going to you that then they know that they can get good product where you're also a manager. Um,
Right.
so it's yeah.
And the other thing I'm just thinking about, dispensaries at this point are all competing for the same customer, really. And the difference is maybe a different selection of products, and they compete on price. So, to my way of thinking, for a medical dispensary to really ramp up their game in offering maybe a group counseling program. I mean, Susan's doing individual one-on-ones, but certainly the notion of offering group counseling, it makes it a little more affordable for people. And I think that draws in a different kind of customer that maybe wouldn't take the leap for an individual appointment. I think a dispensary in this case for this person as a manager, starting a whole new free community education program would be a way to kind of differentiate this dispensary from somebody down the street. So I think with just a little bit of creativity, you can kind of stake your claim as a professional. And I think you'll be surprised that folks, once they know what your capabilities are, they will be happy to refer clients to you. I have somebody here who's asking, Susan, do you have regular clients that you see on a more ongoing basis after they've come in, and maybe this is too soon a question to ask you because this is new for you. I guess in every counseling business, the question is, how do I retain my clients? How do I you want them to get well, obviously, but you want them to keep coming back, or maybe even more importantly, you want them to refer their friends to you, right? I have always said the best marketing for somebody who is in a coaching counseling business is a satisfied customer. I don't know, what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, that's what I want is referrals, definitely. Yeah, and I do want them to get well, and that's why I do 2 follow-ups in my package, because I want to tweak what we're doing. I want to see how what we're doing is or isn't working so well and tweak it, and like that. There was one thing I wanted to say in terms of my research on why it takes so much time, and that is because I find even to my surprise, almost everyone is on a pharmaceutical drug, it
Right.
seems. And so there, this client that I just had, she was on 3 of them. And, and a very healthy person, I must say, but one was for thyroid, the other was for bone loss, and I'm forgetting the other one right now. But anyway, so doing all the research on particularly starting out people with more CBD than THC, all the, the P450 drug interactions,
Right.
and then what, what can we do, and what, it's really kind of complex, each person in that regard.
And you're right. I mean, this is personalized medicine at its best, right? And this is where exciting things are happening in healthcare. And I would venture to say, even for those of you who work at dispensaries, I'm sure you could verify this. I mean, most people coming in the door are looking for an alternative to all of the pharmaceutical drugs that they've been on, either because they're just not getting the relief they need or because of the side effects. So people really are desperate for an option, and you do have to be competent. And that's why, one of the things we try and stress at the academy as students are going through the program is it is a complicated topic. And I have to laugh sometimes when people just say, oh, well, I've worked in a dispensary for 5 years, so yeah, yeah. I mean, I know what to say to patients. And I cringe sometimes when I'm standing in a dispensary and I overhear the health advice that people are being given over the counter.
Mhm.
It's to me, it's a liability waiting to happen. And so we would love to see folks in the dispensary arena get better educated, be able to provide a higher level of service. It's good for the dispensary, it's good for the patient, it's good for the industry, really, to sort of just lift all the boats up together. And then the whole category is viewed with more professionalism, which is what we're trying to bring to the party, in our small little way as we train people. Um, and Susan, what you're doing is this integrative approach, right? You're talking to people. It's not just about the cannabis. What are you eating? What's
Mhm.
your sleep like? What's your exercise like? Right? It's all of these things. It's the whole package.
Mhm. What was so interesting with this client was that her issue was sleep. However, every one of her medications had a potential side effect of of insomnia.
Right. No,
And
no, no wonder she can't sleep, right?
so, but it's a very delicate issue because, this particular person, works for doctors, and does PR for doctors, and so just getting off the drugs is a whole, it's a whole larger conversation, so it's there's much more to it, and a lot of people, even when they meet me, they don't really, they don't understand that there's as much to it as there is,
Right.
in terms of addressing the uniqueness of the individual and their needs.
Right. And on the topic of medication, if you are working with someone that is on medications, never, never, never suggest that they just stop their medications. I mean, this is the
Oh, right.
kind of conversation that you really would love to open up with their physician. And so you really do have to be careful. You're
Mm.
not suggesting that people just stop taking their medications. And in an ideal world, where we would love to get is for those of us who are doing cannabis coaching to develop a rapport with someone's health practitioner, whether it's an MD, a DO, and a naturopath, whoever they may be getting their other care from. So, what I want to really see happen is that we have people who are coaching and counseling, working in concert with the physician, and referring people to the right kind of dispensaries where they're selling good quality products, and that the person behind the counter actually can be helpful as well. So we're getting there. This industry is constantly it's changing every day. We've been in this business for 3+ years now, and I can honestly say it's been changing at lightning speed. There's a question that someone has asked about what certification do you recommend? And I'm not sure if that question was related to what Susan was talking about, because Susan was discussing in Washington State happens to be one of the few states that has a requirement if you're going to work in a dispensary and dispensing medical advice, there is a state certification that you have to get. But that has to do with Washington State only. What we've been discussing here today is the Holistic Cannabis Academy training program, which is the program Susan has gone through, and which I am a co-founder of. And so what we're doing, if you don't know about us and you've just tuned into the webinar because this sounded kind of interesting, thanks for coming. But if this is an area that you're thinking you want to get some training in, and you've been mulling it over and you're not quite sure what program is right for you, if you do have an interest in approaching this in more of a holistic way, in getting competent, not only in cannabis, but how does cannabis work with these other modalities? So our curriculum, our curriculum looks at cannabis and aromatherapy, cannabis and nutrition, cannabis and acupuncture. When you layer these things on top of each other, you get much better patient outcomes. It is more than just giving somebody an edible and having them walk out the door. That is not enough. And that's exactly what Susan has been talking about. This is personalized care. So that's what we do at the Academy. And if that resonates with you, check us out. Our website is holisticcannabisacademy.com. The website's pretty self-explanatory, but if you do have questions and you want to know more, feel free to email me directly. I'm Donna at holisticcannabisacademy.com. So that's what we are doing. We are based in Colorado, but we have students from all over the country. We have students in Canada, some in New Zealand and places further away. So it really doesn't matter where you live, because the science and the foundational understanding is the same. It has no geographic boundaries. So if you're interested in this, check out what we're doing. Susan, do you have any parting words of wisdom for people that are looking to get a foot in the door? You lucked out on the second try. If I were telling somebody what to do, I would say persistence, persistence, persistence. I don't know, what do you think?
I would say that too. And in addition to that, I would say that this is such a cutting edge business that we're doing as coaches alone, not to mention dispensaries, that your persistence will lead you, I think, to points unknown right now, that there is just a world of opportunity that hasn't even shown itself yet. That is, like, as Donna was saying, is developing at lightning speed. So you are a pioneer, and pioneers do take the arrows. And taking the arrows, you have to just keep going, because I know that it's a fully sound and grounded approach when used therapeutically. You'll meet all kinds of people that will try to you know, I don't know, naysayers, and the stigma is still out there. But you know, going through the program as I have, I'm very clear about the value that it is and the amazing benefits that are available to people and so affordable. So it's just a matter of hanging in there and staying associated with other people that know what you're up to.
Right. That's great advice. For those of you who have friends that maybe couldn't make it today to listen, we will make a replay of this available. And so I know people work, they have just different schedules. So we will be making a replay of it available within 48 hours, probably. And if you are not, well, you signed up for the webinar, so now you're on our email list, and you will get emails from us where we just like to keep you up to date on what's going on in the industry, what we're up to, and hopefully answer some of the questions that seem to be on everyone's mind, because everybody's asking very similar questions about this industry and how they can start building a career path for themselves. So I think we're going to wrap up here. Susan, thanks so much. I think you did a great job of laying out what the opportunities are. And thank you for joining us. And we'll catch you the next time.
Thanks for having me.